Welcome back to Decentralounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your truly decentralized SOC 2 Type 2 certified institutional bare metal blockchain infrastructure provider. I'm your host, Ryan Hazinski, head of protocol partnerships, along with my co-host, Wyatt Clancy, our VP of growth. Today, we're joined by Azeem Khan, co-founder of Miden, a next-generation zero-knowledge blockchain focused on enabling scalable applications with both public and private transactions. Azeem has built a reputation as both an operator and a thought leader in the crypto space, with experience spanning venture, ecosystem building, and global impact initiatives. Prior to Miden, he held leadership roles across the Web3 ecosystem, including serving as head of impact at Gitcoin, where he helped direct tens of millions of dollars toward public goods funding and led initiatives at the intersection of blockchain and social impact. He's also worked across venture and advisory roles, contributed to major publications like CoinDesk, Forbes, and Entrepreneur, and continues to be involved in shaping how blockchain is applied to real-world challenges, including his work with the UNICEF Crypto Fund, exploring new models for transparent crypto-native funding systems. Today, through Miden, Azeem is focused on advancing zero-knowledge infrastructure, building what he describes as an edge blockchain designed to support scalable applications with flexible privacy and performance characteristics. Today, we'll talk about Azeem's journey into crypto, what led him to focus on zero-knowledge systems, and how he thinks about the role of privacy, scalability, and real-world impact in the next phase of blockchain adoption. Azeem, welcome to Decentralounge. Super excited to have you here today. Why don't we just start off with your story about how you got involved in the crypto world to begin with?
Thank you for having me. I just wanted to quickly say you have like the perfect voice for being able to read that stuff. I have never seen someone do that so well. I don't know if it's just insane amounts of practice, but you're excellent at it. And yeah, going into the question, so I got into crypto a really long time ago. It was like back in 2012, 2013. I was applying to medical schools at the time, and I was sitting on Twitter a lot. And at the time, there was no crypto Twitter. It was really just Bitcoin Twitter, really. And it was mostly a lot of people talking about more philosophical principles around, decentralization versus centralization, why we, shouldn't like central banks and the way that inflation works and the ideas of like how we ascribe value to things and the philosophy of money and history of money. Like there was all these articles, and had just started reading about it then, started buying and selling crypto. And in that same period, like 2013, I I met the people who made the New York City Bitcoin Center in at the end of 2013 here in New York City. And I was writing for the Huff Post at the time, and they asked me to come to the party and if I thought things were interesting enough that if I'd be open to writing an article about it. And I went to this thing, New Year's Eve 2013 going into 2014, and saw a bunch of people who were extremely intelligent and eclectic, because it was people like completely drunk buying and selling Bitcoin and Dogecoin from each other back when Bitcoin was like, I think at the time it was like $600 maybe. And using QR codes and like the 1920 style Wall Street, like bidding by screaming. And I was just like, this is super interesting. Just the idea that this group of really intelligent people where like, I don't fully understand what's going on, but I'm definitely going to dig into this. And this is a group of people that are not going to be going away. And ended up doing an article, and it got me to start meeting with a bunch of more people like in the Bitcoin OG space at the time. And then early 2014, sort of as a joke, back then, like there was a cryptocurrency called Kanye West. And Kanye West was modeled after the South Park episode about Kanye being a gay fish. And Kanye was very upset about this and sent cease and desist to get them taken off exchanges. And I thought I should do my own crypto, and I'm going to launch Kim Coin Dashian. And so February of 2014, I tried launching Kim Coin. I had no idea what I was doing. There was no ERC20s. There was no Ethereum even at the time. And so I put together a splash page. I had a graphic designer make me like a mock-up for what the logo of the coin would look like. I set up a Twitter, and I started reaching out to media. It was honestly it. And it was like a fun troll that I thought, like, let's see what I can do with this. If I can launch this, like I was 10 years ahead of what meme coins ended up becoming. And uh, I got a cease and desist from the Kardashian family after Newsweek ended up covering us. And I realized like just there was no world where I was going to be able to deal with this. So I ended up shutting it down. And from there, it was like I didn't get full time into crypto till 2021. It's like, but I was there during the ICO bull and like, being on Slacks and Telegram groups and like buying and selling things and Neo and like all of those like random coins at the time, Stellar, Tron, stuff like that, buying and selling things. Then in 2021, I ended up raising a little bit of money for an Ethereum crowdfunding platform. And I was like for artists. And so like this is like a different story, but I spent years in the entertainment industry. I was at Rock Nation for some time, and I'd actually tried raising money for a crypto gaming company in 2019, but I got laughed at by every investor. And so 2021 ended up raising, signed terrible investor agreements, but built the product, launched a token, dealt with market makers, KOLs, like learning how everything works years back. And then started getting token dumped on because we had no lockup period for our token. Tokens started vesting the day of TGE. It was a mess, and left the project at the end of 2021, early 2022, joined Gitcoin. Was honestly super fortunate to join Gitcoin. I had spoken to the founder because I wanted to raise money for a Gitcoin grant to build something, and I was telling him about my background, and he goes, Azeem, you seem like you have a lot of sales and marketing and partnership experience. Would you be open to just joining Gitcoin? And at the time, Gitcoin was giving away millions of dollars per quarter in grants. And I joined the team very quickly, ended up being in a place where I was basically leading all BD sales and partnerships at the DAO. And it was where we did some interesting things with UNICEF. We did some cool things with Shell Oil. We did stuff with the American Cancer Society, raised millions and millions of dollars per quarter for the 2 years that I was there to distribute to thousands of grantees. Like, got a chance to, it was like being in public office where no one was competitive with us and everyone loved us. And so the exchanges were friends, the venture funds were friends, the high net worth individuals were friends, the protocols were friends, all the decision makers at every place were all people that would come and chat with me because we were, a philanthropic organization of sorts that were helping fund the ecosystem. And then 2023, I ended up joining an L2 that I co-founded. It was originally incubated inside of BitGet, a decentralized exchange based out of Singapore. They're a top 5 exchange now. And the idea was, similar to Base. And when I joined, it was an internal incubated project and raised capital, spun it out, differences of opinion with the co-founders and things like that, and like ended up walking away from that project towards the early parts of last year. And now, getting into Miden, I'd started chatting with the Miden team in January of 2025 and chatted with them through April, and really took my time in making the decision, figuring out what I wanted to do next. I was exploring, do I want to go into venture capital? Do I want to go into market making? Do I want to join a TradFi company? Do I want to just like lead BD somewhere at a mature protocol? And honestly, the Miden team, I met primarily with the 2 people who are my co-founders now, and just some of the most humble, hardworking people that I've met in this industry. If you guys are in crypto, most people in this space who don't deserve it have the biggest egos in the world. And the way I see it is, this is a team who, if they had egos, I would be like, you know what, like they worked really hard for it. These guys have no ego, super humble, super hardworking, and yeah, couldn't be happier to be part of the team. I came on as the non-technical co-founder who could help really lead like the business end of things, and officially joined around the time that we announced the spin out from Polygon and announced the fundraise. And I'm going on about a year now that I've been part of the company. Actually, I think today is my like official 1 year that I started. Like, yeah, I actually think it was April 15th last year. So happy 1 year to myself. But yeah, it's been a fun and wild ride in this industry.
No, that's a super cool story. And just so, I mean, the one thing I always appreciate about people's journeys is just the winding nature that people seem
Absolutely.
to end up in the place they really need to be.
Yeah.
And I found it really incredible that it was what won you over was the egolessness of your co-founders and just the fact that they are humble and want to, work and build something meaningful. So let's dive into Miden a little bit more, because
Sure.
you guys are building something, I think, at an important intersection of narrative in our industry. Privacy is such a cornerstone of a conversation right now when it comes to regulation, legislation, everything
Yep.
that's happening with the Clarity Act,
Yep.
something that's being talked about. And now that we have these bigger institutional players moving into the space, they're clearly concerned about privacy.
Mhm.
So I guess maybe let's delve into the thesis of Miden, what you're building, why it's different, and everything that detailed.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
So mine is a non-EVM Rust-based L2. And so non-EVM because the main differentiator on Miden is that we do client-side proving. And so generally to do a transaction on Ethereum, you say, I want to do this transaction, and you send it to the network to execute that, and then it re-executes it by, putting it into every node on the ledger to say that your transaction is now everywhere. The way Miden works is that we believe that execution of your transaction to take place on your local device. And so whether that's your smartphone or your computer, you would execute the transaction there. You would generate a ZK proof. You would send the ZK proof to the network to be verified that the state of your wallet has changed. So, your wallet went from 20 USDC to 10 USDC, and you generate the ZK proof that I've sent this to Ryan's wallet, and then that gets verified by the network, and then it gets added to the chain from there. Where we do things that's interesting too is we do public and private transactions, as you'd mentioned in the intro. And traditionally on these public blockchains, to do a private transaction is more costly and adds more friction. The way Miden works is that generating things privately is the low cost, low friction way. And if you do want to put things publicly, then it's actually the opposite of what these transparent chains do, is that, if you're trying to send the network the transaction to execute it and then do the re-execution on there, it actually costs more, and we add friction for there to make it public. And the idea for all of this had been like, what do we need to do to build a decentralized and permissionless version of a privacy protocol that can also allow compliance? And so the way we see it, like, we're going to launch operationally as an L2 in the beginning. The reason for that is not because we don't love decentralization, but the idea is that when you first launch a protocol, there's going to be bugs. Inherently, it's just like a natural part of launching software. And we felt that launching it on training wheels in a centralized fashion would allow us to make sure, is everything about the prover right? Do we need to add more than one prover here? Does there need to be, sequential and simultaneous proving going on by more than one proving system? And, if there are bugs in the software, which there will be, trying to actually fix those bugs when things are decentralized is going to be way slower, and it's going to be way more difficult to figure that out. Like, being able to push out a fix on a decentralized network is significantly more difficult. And so the way we've seen it, and then to add to that also, you mentioned the Clarity Act. When we announced the fundraise last year, privacy was, number one bad guy. And now we're starting to see that market structure and clarity. We saw Genius pass. We're starting to see the need for developer protections. And it was another part of it was we wanted to understand, what's going to be necessary and required when it comes to being able to launch something like this. And so, part of that is also, it gives us the few years to really figure out how we do this. And then would be to be able to go out and properly decentralize, build this permissionless network. And the way we see it is that the base layer of Miden itself should always stay permissionless, but you can build the KYC, the AML, the KYB, and anything else that needs to be done at the application layer, similar to how the internet works, right? Like, if you're a kid in Pakistan or Bangladesh, or you're in the United States, you are equally able to get on, build software, launch that software, and be able to have people around the world use it. But if you're building something like banking software, and that there are requirements that you need to meet, you build those things at the application level. And so we're looking to figure out what are the things that we need to do, and who are the partners that we need to work with that allow us to build these compliance things in. And from the start, the way we've seen it is, having spent a ton of time in this industry, for the most part, we have funded a lot of how this industry works through reskins of gambling, unregulated versions of gambling. And it's not a moral argument against gambling. It's just to say that, myself and then also the team just don't believe that building a retail speculation product honestly has enough of a business upside as trying to build what the large institutions of this world are looking for. You're not going to get to trillions and trillions of dollars in gambling. It's just not going to happen. We're going to see what we saw during the ICO phase, then what we saw during the NFT boom, then what we saw during meme coins is, billions, maybe hundreds of billions, mostly just like, insider trading going on, and that's great, and you get to generate fees and do all of that. But for us was, let's take the harder approach and let's figure out what do we need to do to actually onboard institutions, and what are the things they're looking for, what are the things that they actually want, what are the things they need. And so it's definitely a longer term process, looking to go to mainnet later this summer, and have already been having some really interesting conversations because, like you said, there's a lot of education that needs to be done, and most of them start at, let's go to the transparent chains that everyone knows and understand and talk about with Ethereum and Solana, and what is Bitcoin. But after that, we see that once they understand enough, they all go to, okay, cool, but like, how do we do this in a private manner? And that's where we see it as, maybe 6 months after mainnet, we're not going to be the biggest thing in the world, but if we're building the right thing over the course of the period that these institutions are getting educated and that we're selling to them why we're the right solution to build on, we'll get there.
Going from founding your own company and now years later co-founding another one, what kind of lessons have you taken in from that first company into mine?
To be really honest with you, one of the biggest lessons I took, especially with that first one in 2021, was really make sure that you're paying the right lawyers, even if it feels expensive. It was a mistake that, I was a little quick to sign because someone was willing to give us money and I didn't really understand what a SAFT was. And I remember asking them, like, what do you mean you don't want equity in the company? And right. So like, knowing that I'm going to make mistakes, but being able to keep the right people around us that, are going to help us with that would probably be one of the biggest things that I took from it. And other than that would be, continue to play long-term games. I've been in this space for a really long time, and I don't own any Lambos, and I don't have, solid gold watches, and I'm not flying private anywhere or any of those kinds of things. And I think that's completely okay. I think so much of this industry has been sold on this notion that it's quick and easy money, and it's not the way that I see it at all. And for a lot of founders who are younger in this space, like me being 38 puts me, when I talk to other founders, like honestly in an ancient place. Whereas I meet all these founders who are in their like early 20s, usually on the late end, they're like, 26 years old, and they look around at what they've seen in this space and they feel like failures if they don't have these asinine things. And so I always try to remind them, like, do not sell your integrity, do not take shortcuts, like be willing to like really go for what you believe in, and over the long term things will work out. Like when I was trying to raise money in 2019 for this crypto gaming company, I could have never imagined that years later I'd be in this position where, I'm a founder of an A16Z funded company, and I've been like fortunate enough to be on panels and on stages with amazing people at DOS. Recently, I was on stage at a fireside with Amy Oldenburg, who is the head of digital asset strategy at Morgan Stanley, and like covered in amazing publications, and like, being reached out to be like, hey, can you please do our podcast like with you guys? And a lot of that comes from understanding that delayed gratification is so necessary. But when I talk to these young founders, I really try to instill that because we live in this age of instant gratification, and it's not the way to do things.
Incredible response, and I appreciate you sharing that wisdom with our viewers, especially the younger ones, because I feel that in many respects. I'm 50, and I was a high school teacher for 20 years, so I felt
Oh,
like
wow.
that was always part of my, trying to impart wisdom. So, I mean, you talked about playing the long term game, and
Yep.
thinking about, you kind of started to allude to this at the end of your answer about what you're building with Miden, but what's down the road for you for the rest of this year, for going into the rest of this decade, into 2030? I mean, like, what do you foresee in terms of evolution for Miden, for our space?
It's funny, man. I think that it really still very much is, we're really early. You know, now I think one of the interesting things I've seen is that we're seeing this massive contraction in the crypto native markets where every single week we're hearing about massive layoffs that are going on from large well-known protocols. We're seeing that there's so much conversation around how difficult it is to raise capital for different teams. We're seeing multiple companies shut down now. Like I think Lattice, the gaming company, announced shutting down in the last day or two. This is a company that's been around for years, and we're seeing so much more of this. And then simultaneously, we're seeing, if you go on LinkedIn, the number of roles available at traditional finance companies with nuance and detail and an understanding of what they're hiring for crypto native roles across the board at every single one of these companies. And, having been around the space multiple times, I remember, I don't know, Goldman Sachs would set up a 50-person crypto team during the bull market, and then the bear would come and they'd fire the entirety of the team. And now we're seeing, even though we're very much so in a bear, that they're ramping up those efforts. And the way that I've been talking about this to people is that there's an interesting irony in the fact that the TradFi folks seem like they're much more pure about the technology and what it enables than the crypto people who are very worried about the token prices. Like, as someone who's been in this space for a long time, I've never seen a better time to build. The SEC is, giving constant guidance. There's the Genius Act passed. It looks like we'll get clarity through in market structure. So we're in a place where there won't be regulation by enforcement. And even if, not getting into politics, we have a completely incompetent person in the Oval Office at the moment. It has still put us in a good position for, some of the other folks that are in there with, the CFTC as well, and where we're headed. And so when we think about what we're building, a lot of it is sitting down and understanding what it is the institutions are even looking for. I think for the most part, crypto has been in this place where they're building solutions and then they go search for the problem afterwards. And what we've been doing for the past year is we are constantly sitting down with who we believe is going to be our end user. And so, as an example, we thought, hey, if you have the ability to do private OTC, it's going to be super big. And this was just an assumption that we had. But instead of just building out private OTC and then going to sell it, I set up calls with what must have been 20 market makers that I have relationships with. And we ended up doing conversations with all of them to understand, hey, like, how do you generally do OTC deals? And what we ended up finding out was private OTC wouldn't be something they would use because generally these OTC deals are happening through text messages, WhatsApp, and Telegram, through people who already privately know each other, and then have the conversation and then do the movement of funds. And so building out an entire way to do private OTC wasn't going to make any sense. Whereas what we have been seeing in one of the products that's being built is it's sort of like a cross-chain railgun. And the idea of it is basically we don't want to, at Miden, recreate DeFi. By no means do we want to make our own DeFi ecosystem. But we do want to make it so that if you want to interact on DeFi privately, that you would be able to. And so we have an excellent team called Lumina who's building right now something that will allow you to be able to go and interact on Aave or Jito or Hyperliquid and do your trades privately by putting funds on Miden and then being able to go interact with those chains. We're seeing some of the market makers and liquid funds we spoke to would love to be able to do dark pools because being able to do their trading, they have all these proprietary things. They don't want that, they put tons of research and effort into what their strategies are, and then copy trading goes on. And we've seen that as a constant conversation. So dark pools is one of the things being built. Chatted with a lot of people about private payroll, like something super simple that we're seeing like Deal is trying to implement, and Toku's talked about it. And like we're like, private payroll makes a lot of sense. People want to get paid in crypto. We're seeing more and more when it comes to stable coins. Like it makes sense to do private payroll. So at the moment, we've been taking this slow and steady approach by having conversations with the potential end users and then doing a ton of user interviews and then coming back and going, okay, cool. This is where we think some of the resources that we have need to actually go to. And we've seen a big thing. Custodians who hold, tons of funds want to be able to hold funds privately, but the amount of regulations and nuance that comes into being able to do that doesn't make sense for us to go full on immediately start building it. Like there are so many rules. If you're Anchorage and you have an OCC charter and everything that comes with being able to hold someone's funds, of course they'd love to be able to do it privately, but that's not a deal that's going to get worked out in 3 months. And so while we're having these conversations, so much of it is, to be very honest, this very iterative process where we're taking it to figure out what is it that is going to make sense that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense, and a very interesting approach to and to finding out what the end goal is. So, for the listeners, where's the best place for them to find you?
I am on Twitter at AZEEMK. It's just first name and then first letter of my last name. That's my Telegram as well, to be really honest. I make myself very accessible. My team gets upset about it because I get a flood of messages all the time. But honestly, I've found that, even if I'm slow to be able to get to some of the responses, it has provided so much benefit to me to make myself available where I can. And so, yeah, Twitter, Telegram, and then on LinkedIn as well. I try to make myself not just available, but like post on LinkedIn. It's something I've been doing for years now. And I remember people used to laugh at it, like, why are you spending time on LinkedIn? And now I'm seeing, as we transition, because to me it was always, if institutions are going to be the end goal and those people live on LinkedIn, then like Twitter is cool, but like really you want to be able to get LinkedIn. And, now in the last few months when I see the inbound come in where it's like executive directors at Morgan Stanley and heads of investment banking at UBS reaching out to me. I had someone from Stripe reach out yesterday and just be like, hey, we want to talk to you about our startup program or something like that, right? So also on LinkedIn, I do check everything. And so, yeah, please feel free to reach out if anything here, spoke to you, so to say.
Well, we'll be sure to link all of those socials so that people can get in touch with you, Azeem. And I also just want to say on a personal note, you are a fantastic writer. I love the way that you articulate your thoughts. And I highly encourage people, especially on X, he's been posting some great articles lately, especially if you're a fan of travel. It's really wonderful writing. So definitely check that out. We'll be sure to link all of those in this episode when it is published. You'll find it on the YouTube links and elsewhere. So for those of you who are listening, or if you're watching and tuning into today's Decentralounge, thank you for taking the time to do so and get to know Azeem Khan and Miden. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Decentralounge. Take care, everybody.